When someone wants to control you, they don't always come at you with anger, shouting, or obvious manipulation. Sometimes the most powerful weapon they use is guilt. Not because you actually did anything wrong, but because guilt is a lever that twists your mind against yourself. Narcissists in particular know this better than anyone. They plant a seed of doubt, water it with guilt, and suddenly you're apologizing for things you never did, sacrificing your peace just to keep the connection alive and losing yourself in the process. The scary part? It doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual, it's calculated, and before you realize it, you're carrying a weight that doesn't even belong to you while they walk free, controlling you with invisible strings. And if you've ever been caught in this cycle, you know how draining it feels. That's why I created my ebook, Surviving the Toxic Bond. It's a survival guide that goes deeper into guilt tripping, ghosting, gaslighting, and all the subtle tactics toxic partners use to keep you hooked. If you're ready to break that cycle and finally take back control, you can download it today. The link's in the description and pinned comment. So let's begin by breaking down where guilt tripping really starts, the subtle hooks they set before you even realize you're being played. Guilt tripping never starts with something obvious. If it did, you'd see it for what it is and walk away. It begins with small, almost invisible hooks. A comment like, "I guess you're too busy for me," when you simply needed a moment for yourself. Or a and silence when you didn't immediately respond the way they wanted. At first, it doesn't even look like manipulation. It looks like vulnerability, like someone expressing disappointment. But underneath it, there's a seed being planted. The idea that you're responsible for their emotions. That's the trap. Because the moment you accept that weight, you hand them the power. You stop asking, "Is this fair?" and you start asking, "How can I fix it?" And once you take on the role of fixer, they've got you exactly where they want you. You become the one over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-giving, while they sit back, controlling the dynamic without ever raising their voice. What makes this so dangerous is how subtle it feels in the beginning. It doesn't scream manipulation, it whispers it. And because of that, most people miss it until the hooks are already deep. This is why guilt tripping works. Not because you did something wrong, but because you care. They exploit your empathy, twist it, and use it against you. Here's the brutal truth. Narcissist and toxic people don't guilt trip strangers. They guilt trip the people who care about them. Why? Because guilt only works if you have empathy. If you didn't care, you wouldn't feel bad when they sighed, go silent, or say, "After everything I do for you?" They know your kindness is their strongest weapon, so they turn it against you. Think about the times you've been made to feel bad for something as simple as needing space, setting a boundary, or saying no. You weren't cruel, you weren't selfish, you were human. But in their world, your humanity is twisted into proof that you're cold, ungrateful, or even toxic yourself. That's the sleight of hand. They shift the blame, and suddenly you're defending yourself instead of questioning their behavior. The genius in the sickness of guilt tripping is that it puts you in a loop. The more you try to prove your love, your loyalty, your good intentions, the deeper you fall into their game. You end up apologizing for things you didn't do, bending in ways you shouldn't, and sacrificing your own peace just to silence the guilt they planted in you. And here's the part most people miss. This is not random. It's not just them being emotional. It's calculated conditioning. Every sigh, every guilt-soaked comment, every silent treatment after you don't meet their unspoken expectations, it's training. Training you to associate your peace with their approval. Training you to put their comfort above your own. Training you to believe that if they're upset, it must be your fault. That's why so many people stay stuck. Because guilt feels like responsibility, but it's not. It's control dressed up as morality. Here's where guilt tripping becomes dangerous. It's not just about making you feel bad for one action. It's about reshaping how you see yourself. At first, it sounds like criticism. "You never think of me," or "You're always so selfish." But repeated enough, it seeps past your defenses. You stop hearing it as an exaggeration and start absorbing it as truth. Guilt goes from "I made a mistake" to "I am the mistake." This is the psychological pivot narcissists are aiming for. Once guilt attaches to your identity, you're no longer defending an action, you're defending your very worth. And when you're busy proving you're a good person or a loving partner, you'll go to extremes. You'll over-explain, over-apologize, and over-give. You'll abandon your own standards just to escape the crushing weight of being the bad one. It's a trap because the rules are always moving. One day it's that you didn't reply fast enough. The next day it's that you weren't affectionate enough. Then it's that you didn't anticipate their needs before they even voiced them. The guilt never ends because it was never about the action. It was always about control. And the more you try to earn your way out of guilt, the deeper you fall into self-doubt. This is why so many people stay stuck in toxic bonds. They're not just fighting for the relationship, they're fighting for their identity, for the right to not feel like a bad person. And that battle can last years if you don't step back and see the game for what it is. Here's the stoic truth. You are not who someone else accuses you of being. Their guilt trips don't define your worth. They expose their fear of losing control.
Once a narcissist knows they planted guilt inside you, they don't need to scream to control you. They switch to subtler weapons, the kind that hit harder than shouting ever could. The first tool? Silence. They pull back, ignore your messages, give you the cold shoulder, and suddenly your mind fills in the blanks. You replay every word you said, every action you took, trying to decode what went wrong. The silence becomes a mirror where you project guilt onto yourself. They don't even need to accuse you anymore. You accuse yourself. The second tool, sacrifice. They'll remind you of everything they've ever done for you. Maybe they gave you time, attention, money, affection, and they'll frame it like a debt you'll never finish paying. After everything I'm done for you, this is how you treat me? That one line can break you down faster than hours of yelling, because now you're not just guilty of a mistake, you're ungrateful, undeserving, disloyal. They rewrite history so every good thing becomes leverage against you. The third tool, disappointment. This is quieter than anger and more poisonous. They sigh, they shake their head, they say things like, "I thought you were different," or "I guess I can't rely on you." That's not rage, that's calculated shame. It's designed to hit you in your core identity, to make you prove your value all over again. And the worst part, you often rush to prove it. You overcompensate, you try harder, you give more just to erase the image of being the one who let them down. These tactics are powerful because they don't feel like outright attacks. They feel like your own conscience turning on you. But in reality, it's their strategy to make you carry a weight they never intend to lift. Here's the truth. Real love doesn't weaponize silence. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't leave you drowning in guilt just so one person can stay in control. If you're trapped in that cycle, it's not love. It's emotional bondage disguised as connection. And once you see the weapons for what they are, you start building the shield of detachment. The only way guilt tripping works is if you pick it up and carry it. And that's the secret most people miss. Narcissists can throw out accusations, sighs, silence, and disappointment all day, but none of it has power until you accept it as truth. This is where stoicism becomes your weapon, because stoicism teaches us a simple law. You don't control what they say or do, but you control whether you absorb it. The moment you stop internalizing their narrative, the entire game collapses. Here's how it works in real time. First, you have to spot the tactic. When someone suddenly goes silent after conflict, don't panic. Ask yourself, is this silence an honest boundary or a weapon to make me chase? That one question alone keeps you from falling into the trap of self-blame. When they play the sacrifice card, after everything I've done for you, pause and remind yourself, love is not a debt. Care given freely cannot be weaponized unless I allow it. When they drop disappointment, I thought you were different. That's the bait. It's meant to make you scramble to prove your worth. The antidote? I don't need to prove my value to someone who doubts it at convenience. The key is detachment without hatred. If you react with anger, you're still chained to their game. If you collapse with guilt, you're owned. But if you stand calm, firm, and centered, you take the weapon out of their hand without ever swinging back. This is the stoic shield, a stillness that says, I see what you're doing, but it doesn't belong to me. Think of it like someone trying to hand you a heavy backpack filled with rocks. You can choose to grab it, sling it over your shoulders and carry it until your knees buckle, or you can simply refuse to take it. That's what guilt tripping really is. Them trying to hand you weight that isn't yours. The stoic move, leave it on the ground. Here's where most people slip. They confuse detachment with coldness, but detachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let your feelings be controlled. You can love someone and still refuse to carry their manufactured guilt. You can care without being controlled. And once you master that balance, guilt tripping loses its power over you. Because the ultimate flex isn't fighting back, and it's not apologizing your soul away, it's being so centered in who you are that no amount of silence, shame, or twisted words can pull you off balance. Guilt tripping always starts small. A sigh here, a disappointed look there, a reminder of something you should have done. It feels harmless at first. You brush it off, thinking, maybe I was being unfair. Maybe they're right. But here's the dangerous part. Every time you accept false guilt, you train them. You teach them that their tactic works. And when a manipulator learns what works, they don't stop, they double down. What begins as subtle disappointment quickly morphs into a pattern where you're apologizing constantly, even for things outside your control. You start saying sorry for your tone, for your boundaries, for not replying fast enough, for having needs. And every time you bend, they push further because now they know you'll fold. The guilt becomes a leash, invisible but tight. And before long, you're not just adjusting small behaviors to avoid upsetting them, you're restructuring your entire life around their moods. This is where the slide happens. You stop trusting your own perception. Instead of asking, am I okay with this, you ask, will this upset them? That shift right there is the hallmark of control. Your center of gravity moves from inside yourself inside them. And once that transfer happens, they don't even need to guilt trip you as often because you'll start preemptively controlling yourself to avoid their disappointment. That's how invisible chains are built. And here's the kicker. Guilt tripping, left unchecked, doesn't just control actions, it rewires your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone worthy of balance and respect, and instead you begin to see yourself as the problem. Their favorite narrative becomes your inner voice. I'm too much. I'm never enough. I always mess things up. And once they own your self-perception, they own everything. This is why catching guilt tripping early matters, because what seems like small concessions, a few apologies, a few moments of over-explaining, a few times saying yes when you wanted to say no, builds into a lifestyle of self-erasure. And once you're deep in, it feels almost impossible to crawl back out because you've lost the ability to distinguish what's really yours from what they planted. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. Control built on guilt is fragile. The moment you stop playing along, the moment you refuse to pick up the weight, their entire strategy collapses. They don't have real authority over you, they just have your cooperation. Take that away and the leash snaps. There always comes a moment, a quiet one usually, when something inside you just clicks. You realize that every apology, every explanation, every act of bending hasn't actually fixed anything. In fact, the more you try to smooth things over, the more entitled they became. And suddenly you see it for what it is, a rigged game. One where you can never win because the rules were designed to keep you losing. That's the breaking point. It doesn't always happen with a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's subtle. Maybe they sigh again, roll their eyes, throw that familiar line, I guess you don't care then. And this time, instead of scrambling to prove yourself, you sit still. You don't justify, you don't over-explain, you don't pick up the bait. And in that silence, you feel something powerful. The chain they wrapped around you suddenly loosens. Now, here's the twist. When you stop responding to guilt, manipulators panic. Why? Because guilt only works if you accept it. If you refuse the package, they can't deliver it. And when they realize you're no longer carrying their emotional baggage, they scramble. They may get louder. They may try new tactics, anger, blame shifting, even playing the victim harder than ever before. How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you? Their desperation is proof that you've broken the system. But this is also the most dangerous stage because they'll pull out their strongest tricks. They'll throw history in your face, remind you of your flaws, guilt you about family, about loyalty, about being cold or selfish. They'll try to make you feel like choosing yourself is betrayal. But remember this, protecting your peace isn't betrayal. Refusing manipulation isn't cruelty. It's the first time in the entire relationship that you're acting with true clarity. And here's where stoic wisdom applies. You don't need to fight fire with fire. You don't need to scream, argue, or prove anything. The real flex is composure. A calm, "I'm not carrying that guilt anymore," spoken with quiet certainty, hits harder than any outburst, because it shows them they've lost the lever they've been pulling all along. This breaking point is also where you begin to see their power for what it was, an illusion. They never had control, they only borrowed yours. And the moment you take it back, the entire dynamic flips. The guilt tripping that once crushed you now feels hollow, even laughable, because you finally see it as their problem, not yours.
Once you've stopped carrying guilt that was never yours, the silence inside you feels different. At first, it's strange, almost unsettling. For so long, your nervous system was wired to react. The sigh, the cold shoulder, the passive-aggressive comments, they all triggered you to explain, to fix, to prove yourself. Without that constant pull, part of you might feel empty. That's normal. That emptiness isn't a loss, it's space. Space that manipulation used to occupy. Space you can now fill with self-respect, boundaries, and peace. The key now is not to let old habits sneak back in, because guilt tripping doesn't just vanish with one realization. They may test you again, circle back, try another angle. Or even after they're gone, new people may step into your life with the same tactics. But here's where you stand stronger. Now you recognize it instantly. The sigh that used to shake you, you see it as theater. The accusations that once cut deep, you hear them as noise. And instead of bending, you pause, breathe, and stay grounded. That pause, that choice not to react, is what cements your freedom. This is where you truly step into self-control. You start setting boundaries without the tremble in your voice. You say no without apologizing. You stop explaining your worth to people who already decided to undervalue it. And most importantly, you no longer confuse guilt with love. Real love doesn't make you feel indebted, ashamed, or small. Real love lifts you, respects you, and allows you to be free. And here's the hidden reward. Once you break free of guilt tripping, you realize you didn't just escape them, you escaped a version of yourself. The version that believed peace had to be earned by overgiving. The version that thought silence meant abandonment, and that pleasing others was the price of being loved. That self is gone, and in its place is someone calmer, stronger, more unshakable. Life beyond their control isn't just about cutting ties with toxic people. It's about cutting ties with the need for their approval. Because once you stop seeking validation from people who feed on your weakness, you become untouchable. The manipulator loses interest. The narcissist can't get supply. The toxic partner realizes their games don't work. And you, for the first time, realize that peace was never something they could give or take. It was always yours. So when you think about guilt tripping now, you won't see it as something that crushed you. You'll see it as the very pressure that forged you, the thing that showed you what you will never tolerate again, and the thing that proved that silence, calm, and self-control will always beat manipulation no matter how clever or cruel it pretends to be. That's the freedom they never wanted you to have, and that's exactly why you'll never hand it back. At the end of the day, guilt only has the power you allow it to have. The moment you stop apologizing for things you didn't do and refuse to carry the weight that isn't yours, you take back control. That's the essence of strength. Not shouting, not proving, just standing firm in your silence and self-respect. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more videos that sharpen your mind and harden your spirit, because this channel is about making you unbreakable. And remember, if you're ready to go deeper, my ebook, Surviving the Toxic Bond, is there for you. Download it today, linked in the description and the pinned comment.
Stay disciplined, stay untouchable.